Hello there, and welcome to Simple Sleepy Science. Tonight, we embark on a gentle exploration of the snail, a creature of quiet fascination. These ancient, unhurried wanderers are the epitome of self-sufficiency, lading their portable homes on their backs as they traverse the world at a pace that defies the rush of modern life. One of their most intriguing secrets lies in the remarkable slime they secrete, a protective shield so resilient it allows them to glide across a razor's edge unscathed. This is an invitation to cultivate calm curiosity, to pause, breathe, and immerse yourself in the subtle wonders of the natural world. Settle in comfortably and let's drift into the soothing realm of snails. If you enjoy these quiet journeys through science, please like and subscribe so you don't miss more peaceful stories tomorrow. And leave a comment telling us where you're watching from and what time it is there. It helps us feel connected across the miles. Now, let's begin with something extraordinary. From the moment a snail is born, it's already wearing a shell. Not a complete one, just a tiny, delicate spiral, no bigger than a grain of sand. But it's there, ready to grow. This shell will become the snail's home for its entire life. It will never leave it, never outgrow it and move to a new one. Instead, the shell grows with the snail, expanding in a perfect mathematical pattern that's been repeating for hundreds of millions of years. The shape is called a logarithmic spiral. It's the same pattern you see in hurricanes, in galaxies, in the curl of a fern as it unfolds. Nature uses this design again and again because it's elegant and efficient. As the snail grows, each new curve of the shell is slightly larger than the one before it, but the proportions stay the same. The spiral expands outward while keeping its exact shape. But how does a soft-bodied creature build something this precise? The answer lies in a thin layer of tissue called the mantle. It wraps around the snail's body, just inside the shell's opening. This mantle is a living factory. It takes calcium carbonate from the snail's food and from the soil, combines it with proteins, and secretes it along the shell's edge. Drop by drop, the material hardens into new shell. The process happens slowly, so slowly you'd never see it, but it never stops. Every day, a thin ring of new material appears at the shell's lip. Layer after layer, ring after ring, the spiral grows. If you looked at a cross-section of shell under a microscope, you'd see these layers stacked like the pages of a book. Each one records a moment in time, a day in the snail's life. The colors and patterns in shells come from pigments in the snail's diet. A snail eating certain plants might have brown stripes. Another eating different vegetation might be pale yellow or cream. Some species create stunning patterns, dots and swirls and bands of color, all determined by what they eat and when they eat it. But the shell isn't just beautiful. It's also incredibly strong for its weight. The calcium carbonate crystals arrange themselves in layers that can absorb impact. If a snail falls from a height, the shell's curved design distributes the force. The spiral shape itself provides structural support, each coil bracing the ones inside it. And here's what's truly remarkable. The shell is porous. Tiny holes throughout its structure allow air and moisture to pass through. The snail can actually sense humidity changes through its shell. On dry days, it feels the air pulling moisture away. On damp days, it feels the relief of water in the atmosphere. The shell isn't a prison. It's a sensitive, living extension of the snail's body. This architecture, built molecule by molecule, carries the snail through its world. It's both armor and home, both telescope and sanctuary, grown from the inside out in a spiral that's been perfected across ages. And it all begins with that first tiny whirl, smaller than a seed, appearing on a newborn snail, ready to begin its slow journey. That shell we just explored does something you might not expect. It breathes. Well, not the shell itself, but there's a hidden opening that makes breathing possible. Look closely at a snail, and you'll see a small hole on the right side of its body, just under the shell's edge. This is called the pneumostome. It's a breathing pore that opens and closes like a tiny mouth, pulling air into a lung cavity inside the shell. Yes, lung. Most land snails have a single lung, a hollow space lined with blood vessels. Air flows in through the pneumostome, oxygen passes into the blood, and carbon dioxide flows back out. It's a simple system, but it works. The snail controls this opening with a ring of muscle, opening it when air is moist, closing it when conditions get too dry. Because here's the thing about snails. They're caught between two worlds. They evolved from water-dwelling ancestors millions of years ago, but they never fully adapted to land. Their bodies still need moisture to function. Without it, their skin dries out, their slime stops flowing, and they can't move or eat or breathe properly. So what happens when the weather turns harsh? When summer heat bakes the ground and every drop of moisture disappears? The snail has a solution, and it's elegant in its simplicity. It retreats inside its shell completely. Not just part way, but all the way back, pulling its soft body deep into those protective spirals. Then it does something remarkable. It creates a door. Using its muscular foot, the snail secretes a thick layer of mucus across the shell opening. This mucus dries quickly in the air, hardening into a thin, papery seal called an epiphragm. It's temporary, meant to last only as long as the dry spell. But while it's there, it's effective. The seal keeps moisture inside and dry air outside. Behind this door, the snail enters a state of dormancy. Its heartbeat slows. Its metabolism drops to a fraction of normal. It's not quite sleep and not quite hibernation, but something in between. The snail becomes almost entirely still, burning through its stored energy at the slowest possible rate. This state can last for weeks, months even. There are records of garden snails surviving 3 years sealed inside their shells, waiting for conditions to improve. They're patient in ways we can barely imagine. Time moves differently when you're locked in a spiral, suspended between living and waiting. The shell's porosity helps during this dormancy. Even sealed, tiny amounts of air still pass through the calcium carbonate structure. The snail breathes incredibly slowly, just enough to stay alive. Its body uses the moisture trapped inside, recycling it carefully, losing only the smallest amounts through the shell's microscopic pores. When rain finally comes, the snail senses it. Humidity rises. Moisture seeps through the shell. The snail begins to wake. It secretes enzymes that dissolve the epiphragm from the inside, softening the seal. Then, slowly, it emerges. The dried mucus door cracks and falls away, and the snail extends its foot back into the world. This cycle happens every year for many snails. Summer dormancy, winter hibernation. Each time, they seal themselves away and wait. Each time, they trust that conditions will improve, that rain will return, that life will begin again. It's survival through patience, through the ability to simply stop and wait for the world to become livable again. And all of it is made possible by that breathing hole, that small pneumostome that opens and closes, pulling in air when times are good, sealing tight when times are hard. That mucus we just talked about, the kind that forms a protective door, is only one type of slime a snail produces. The other kind is even more fascinating. It's what lets snails defy gravity. Watch a snail climb a wall or hang upside down from a leaf. It shouldn't work. The snail is soft and heavy, with no claws or suction cups. Yet it sticks perfectly to smooth surfaces, moving up glass, across ceilings, along the thinnest branches. The secret is in the slime beneath its foot. This mucus is strange stuff. It acts as both glue and lubricant at the same time, which seems impossible. How can something be sticky and slippery simultaneously? The answer lies in its structure. Snail slime has two layers. The bottom layer, pressed against the surface, is thick and adhesive. It grips whatever the snail is crawling on. The top layer, touching the snail's foot, is thinner and more liquid. It lets the foot glide forward smoothly. So the snail sticks and slides in the same moment, anchored to the surface, but free to move across it. The slime itself is mostly water mixed with proteins and sugars that form long, tangled chains. When the snail presses down, these chains stretch and grip. When it lifts its foot to move forward, the chains relax. It's a material that changes properties depending on how much pressure is applied. Scientists call this viscoelastic, meaning it acts like both a viscous liquid and an elastic solid. This is why a snail can crawl across a razor blade without being cut. The slime spreads the snail's weight so evenly that no single point of contact has enough pressure to penetrate the blade's edge. The whole body glides on a cushion of mucus, never actually touching the sharp metal directly. But the slime does more than enable movement. It carries information. Every time a snail travels, it leaves a trail behind. This isn't just leftover mucus. It's a chemical message written on the ground. The trail contains pheromones, scent markers that other snails can detect and interpret. These trails say things. This way to food. This path is safe. I am here, looking for a mate. Other snails follow these trails like roads. A snail searching for food can pick up the scent of another snail's path and track it to a food source it has never seen before. A young snail can follow the trail of an adult to find shelter. During mating season, snails follow pheromone trails to locate partners. The trails last for hours, sometimes days, if the weather stays moist. Rain can wash them away, but until then, they persist as invisible highways, crisscrossing gardens and forests. If you could see these trails the way snails sense them, the ground would look like a glowing network of paths, each one telling a story about who passed by and where they were going. Some snails even follow their own trails back home. After a night of foraging, they retrace their path using their own chemical scent. It's a form of memory written in slime, a breadcrumb trail that guides them back to their favorite resting spot under a particular leaf or stone. The slime protects them too. It creates a barrier between their soft skin and rough surfaces. It seals moisture against their body. It even has antimicrobial properties that fight bacteria and fungi. This substance they produce constantly, trailing it behind them wherever they go, is shield and road and message all at once. And they make it effortlessly, their bodies producing exactly as much as they need, laying down silvery paths that catch the light and mark their passage through the world. Those chemical trails guide snails through their world, but they're not navigating blind. Look at a snail's head and you'll see 4 tentacles reaching forward, 2 longer ones on top and 2 shorter ones below. The longer tentacles have eyes at their tips. Actual eyes, small dark spots that detect light and shadow. They can't see details the way we do. No sharp images, no colors, no faces. Just brightness and darkness, the difference between day and night, between open space and shelter. But even this simple vision is useful. A snail can tell when a shadow passes overhead, which might mean a bird or a predator. It can distinguish between the darkness under a leaf and the brightness of exposed ground. It knows when dawn is coming and when evening arrives. These are the things that matter in a snail's life, and its eyes give it just enough information to respond. What's remarkable is how these eyes work. They're primitive compared to human eyes, but they're self-contained units at the end of flexible stalks. The snail can point them in different directions, sweeping its gaze across its surroundings. And when danger threatens, it can do something we can't. It pulls its eyes inside its head. The tentacles are retractable. The snail draws them down and inward, tucking them safely away inside its body. Touch a snail's eye stalk gently and watch it disappear, pulled back by muscles that contract like tiny drawstrings. A few moments later, once the threat has passed, the tentacle slowly extends again, the eye emerging to resume its watch. The shorter tentacles serve a different purpose. They're chemical sensors, like the ones insects have. These lower tentacles taste and smell simultaneously, detecting molecules in the air and on surfaces. They're far more sensitive than the eyes. A snail explores its world primarily through these chemical senses, touching its shorter tentacles to leaves, to soil, to other snails. When a snail finds food, it's usually these lower tentacles that discover it first. They pick up the scent of decay, of fresh vegetation, of ripening fruit. The tentacles wave back and forth, sampling the air, following chemical gradients toward the source. Once the food is located, the tentacles touch it directly, confirming that it's edible before the snail begins to eat. These same tentacles help snails recognize each other. Each snail has a slightly different chemical signature in its slime. When 2 snails meet, they touch tentacles, exchanging information. It's not quite like seeing another snail, and not quite like smelling it either. It's a sense we don't have, the ability to read another creature's chemistry directly. The snail's entire body is sensitive to touch. Its foot feels texture, pressure, vibration. But the tentacles are specialized. They're the snail's primary way of understanding its immediate surroundings. While the eyes provide broad awareness of light and space, the tentacles provide intimate detail about what's directly in front of the snail's face. Together, these four stalks create a sensory picture of the world. It's not the world as we experience it, full of color and sharp edges and distant sounds. It's simpler, closer, a world of near things, of chemicals and textures, of light gradients and moisture levels. The snail moves through this world slowly, gathering information constantly through organs designed for a life lived 1 inch at a time. And when those tentacles retract at the first sign of danger, when the snail pulls everything inside and seals its shell, it's not panicking. It's simply responding to information its senses have provided, doing what evolution has taught it to do, protecting the soft, vulnerable parts until the world feels safe enough to explore again. Once those tentacles find food, the snail has to eat it. And the way it does this is unlike anything else in nature. Inside the snail's mouth is a ribbon-like tongue called a radula. But calling it a tongue doesn't capture what it really is. Imagine a conveyor belt covered in thousands of tiny teeth, all arranged in precise rows. That's a radula. The teeth are made of chitin, the same material in insect exoskeletons. They're incredibly hard for their size, sharp enough to scrape through plant tissue, algae, even limestone. Each tooth is microscopically small, but there are so many of them. A garden snail might have 14,000 teeth on its radula. Some species have more. These teeth point backward, toward the snail's throat. As the radula moves forward and back, it works like a file, scraping food into tiny particles. The snail presses its mouth against a surface, a leaf or a mushroom or a piece of fruit, and begins to rasp. Back and forth, back and forth. The radula strips away microscopic layers of food. You can hear it sometimes if you listen closely. When a snail is eating, there's a faint scratching sound, almost like sandpaper on wood. That's thousands of tiny teeth grinding against plant matter, breaking it down particle by particle. The radula moves on a cartilage base that rocks forward and backward in the mouth. As it moves forward, the teeth contact the food. As it pulls back, the scraped particles get swept into the throat and down to the digestive system. It's continuous, rhythmic, mechanical. The snail doesn't chew. It files its food into powder. Over time, the front teeth wear down from all this scraping. But the snail doesn't run out of teeth. New ones grow constantly from the back of the radula, moving forward to replace the worn ones. It's like a slow assembly line. Old teeth drop off at the front, while fresh teeth emerge from the back, ensuring the radula stays sharp throughout the snail's life. Different snails have different radula designs depending on what they eat. Herbivorous snails that eat plants have tough, uniform teeth for scraping cellulose. Snails that eat algae have finer, more numerous teeth. And there are predatory snails, though they're less common, with specialized teeth shaped like harpoons or daggers. These carnivorous snails hunt other snails or worms, using their radulas to drill through shells or tear into soft tissue. Garden snails eat a surprising variety of things. Fresh leaves, obviously, but also dead plant matter, fungi, rotting wood, animal droppings. They're decomposers as much as herbivores, helping break down organic material and return nutrients to the soil. That's why you often find them on compost piles or near fallen fruit. They're cleanup crew, filing everything into digestible particles. Some snails also eat soil directly, scraping minerals from dirt and stone. They need calcium to build their shells, and sometimes the easiest source is limestone rock or calcium-rich earth. The radula is strong enough to abrade stone, leaving tiny scratch marks where a snail has been feeding on a mineral surface. The process is slow, of course. Everything about snails is slow. A snail might spend an hour eating a single leaf, rasping methodically from one side to the other. But there's no rush. The radula never stops, never tires, just keeps moving back and forth, filing the world into bite-sized pieces, small enough to swallow. And in this way, grain by grain, the snail sustains itself, converting the world around it into energy and shell and slime, all through this remarkable ribbon of teeth hidden inside its quiet mouth. All this feeding requires travel. A snail might seem like it stays in one small area, but track one for several nights and you'll discover it covers surprising ground. Garden snails can travel 25 feet in a single evening, though most move less. That might not sound like much until you consider it from the snail's perspective. For a creature an inch long, 25 feet is like a human walking half a mile, and they do it by rippling their single muscular foot, leaving a slime trail the entire way. They're not wandering randomly. Snails have territories, areas they know and return to regularly. They remember landmarks, not consciously perhaps, but their nervous system stores information about their environment. A particular plant, a specific rock, the base of a garden wall. These become reference points in their mental map. Studies have shown that if you move a snail to an unfamiliar location, it will try to navigate back to its home territory. Sometimes successfully, sometimes not, depending on the distance. But the impulse is there. The snail knows where it belongs and tries to return. How do they navigate? Partly through those chemical trails we discussed earlier. A snail can follow its own scent back to familiar areas, retracing paths it has taken before. But they also use other cues. Light and darkness help them orient. Texture underfoot gives them information. Moisture gradients guide them toward damper areas where food is more abundant. They establish routines. Many snails are crepuscular, most active at dawn and dusk, when humidity is high, but light is still available. They emerge from their resting spots, travel to feeding areas, then return before the day gets too hot or the night too cold. This daily circuit becomes habit, worn into the landscape through repetition. Certain locations become favorites. A snail might rest under the same leaf every day for weeks, not because it's stuck there, but because it has learned that spot is safe. The right amount of shade, close to good feeding areas, sheltered from wind and rain. The snail remembers and returns. They also seem to recognize their own species. When multiple snails inhabit the same area, they often rest together in groups. This isn't random clustering. They're choosing to be near each other, possibly because groups retain moisture better than individuals. Huddled together, they create a microclimate that benefits everyone. These resting spots become hubs. At night, snails disperse to feed, spreading across a garden or forest floor. But as morning approaches, they converge back on familiar locations. If you watch the same spot over several days, you'll see the same individuals returning. They're not hermits. They're commuters with established routes and preferred destinations. Their range is limited by moisture. A snail won't travel far across dry ground because it loses water too quickly. So their territories tend to follow moisture patterns. Along the edge of a pond, under a thick hedge, through a vegetable garden that gets watered regularly. They map the world according to where they can survive, and they learn these maps through experience. Young snails often follow the trails of adults, learning safe routes before establishing their own territories. It's not teaching exactly, but information transfer through chemistry. The young snail reads the landscape through the paths others have left behind, discovering which directions lead to food and shelter. And so the garden fills with invisible highways, each snail maintaining its own circuit, traveling the same roads night after night, building a lifetime of knowledge about a space no larger than a few square yards, but knowing it intimately, completely, in ways we never could. That dependence on moisture isn't just a preference, it's a matter of survival. A snail's body is up to 80% water, more liquid than solid. Without constant moisture, they begin to break down. Their skin is permeable, meaning water passes through it easily. This is useful for absorbing moisture from their environment, but it also means they lose water constantly through evaporation. On a hot, dry day, a snail can lose a dangerous amount of body water in just a few hours. This is why you rarely see snails during the day. They're not sleeping in any meaningful sense. They're hiding, conserving moisture, waiting for conditions to improve. Under leaves, where shade keeps temperatures down. Beneath rocks, where the ground stays damp. In crevices and under bark, anywhere the air holds more humidity than the open spaces. The slime helps, creating a barrier that slows water loss. But it's not perfect. The slime itself is mostly water, so producing it costs moisture. There's a balance the snail must maintain, using enough slime to move and protect itself, but not so much that it dehydrates. When humidity rises, snails become active. After a rain shower, gardens come alive with them. They emerge from hiding spots, extending their bodies fully, moving with more speed than usual because the air is saturated and they can afford to be less cautious with their moisture. You can see the difference in their behavior. On humid nights, snails roam widely, taking risks, crossing open ground. On dry nights, they stay close to shelter, moving minimally, conserving every drop. They're constantly reading the environment, making decisions based on how much moisture the air holds. Temperature matters too, but mostly because it affects humidity. Cold air holds less moisture, but it also slows evaporation. Hot air accelerates water loss. So snails are most active on warm, humid nights when temperatures are comfortable and the air is thick with moisture. During extended dry periods, they go into that dormant state we discussed, sealing themselves away. But before that point, they employ other strategies. They burrow into soil, surrounding themselves with damp earth. They cluster together, multiple snails pressed close, sharing moisture and reducing the surface area exposed to dry air. Some snails produce extra slime and coat their shells with it, creating a protective layer. Others press themselves tight against surfaces, minimizing gaps where air can circulate and steal moisture. Every adaptation is about retention, about holding onto water as tightly as possible. Their kidneys are remarkably efficient, extracting every bit of usable water from their waste. What they excrete is almost entirely solid, the liquid portion recycled back into their bodies. It's a closed system designed to waste nothing. This vulnerability to dehydration shapes everything about their lives: where they live, when they move, how far they travel, what they eat. Every decision a snail makes is filtered through the question of moisture. Is there enough? Will there be enough? Can I reach safety before the air dries out? And yet they persist, these creatures made mostly of water, living on land where water is never guaranteed. They've found ways to survive in an environment that should kill them, through patience and adaptation, and an endless series of small, careful choices about when to move and when to wait. The world is harsh for a body made of liquid. But snails have learned to navigate it, reading the humidity, following the damp, always searching for the moisture that keeps them alive. These survival strategies have been working for a very long time. Snails are ancient, far older than most creatures alive today. The fossil record shows snails existed 500 million years ago, back in the Cambrian period, when life was just beginning to explode in diversity. They watched continents form and break apart. They survived ice ages and asteroid impacts. They were here long before dinosaurs appeared, and they're still here long after dinosaurs disappeared. The mass extinction that ended the dinosaurs 66 million years ago killed 3/4 of all species on Earth. But snails made it through. When the asteroid hit and the sky filled with dust, when temperatures plummeted and plants died and food chains collapsed, snails sealed themselves in their shells and waited. Their ability to enter dormancy, to slow their metabolism to almost nothing, saved them when faster, more active creatures starved. They survived other extinctions too. The Permian extinction 252 million years ago, the worst in Earth's history, which killed 96% of marine species. Snails took losses, certainly, but enough survived to rebuild. Their adaptability, their patience, their ability to live on almost anything edible, these traits carried them through catastrophes that eliminated most other life forms. Over those millions of years, they spread everywhere. Antarctica is the only continent without land snails, and that's only because it's too cold and dry for them to survive. Everywhere else, they found ways to adapt. Deserts and rainforests, mountains and caves, islands and continents. Each environment produced new species, each one perfectly suited to its particular home. There are at least 35,000 known species of land snails alive today, and probably many more waiting to be discovered. They range in size from tiny snails smaller than a grain of rice to the giant African snail that can grow 8 inches long. Some have tall, pointed shells. Others have flat spirals. Some are bright and colourful. Others are dull and camouflaged. The variety is staggering, but they all share the same basic body plan: a muscular foot, a spiral shell, a radula for feeding, tentacles for sensing. This design appeared hundreds of millions of years ago and proved so successful that evolution barely needed to change it. Minor adjustments for different environments, but the core remained the same. This is what successful adaptation looks like. Not dramatic transformation, but patient refinement. Finding a design that works and sticking with it across geological timescales. While other creatures evolved into 1,000 different forms, trying new strategies, snails stayed mostly the same because they got it right early. They evolved slowly too. Most snails don't produce many offspring compared to insects or fish. They don't have rapid generation times. Changes happen gradually, over thousands of years. But small changes, accumulated across millions of years, produce the incredible diversity we see today. And through it all, the fundamental snail remained recognizable. The fossils from 500 million years ago look like snails. They had shells. They crawled on a foot. The details differed, but the essence stayed constant. It's a form that's been tested against every environmental challenge Earth could throw at it, and passed every test. We live in a world shaped by speed and change, where success seems to demand constant adaptation and rapid response. But snails remind us that patience works too. Slow, steady survival across timescales we can barely comprehend. They were here before us, and unless something catastrophic happens, they'll be here long after we're gone, still moving at their own pace, still carrying their ancient design forward into whatever future awaits. That diversity across species came through reproduction, but snails reproduce in ways that seem almost impossibly complex for such simple creatures. Most land snails are hermaphrodites. Each individual carries both male and female reproductive organs. Any snail can be both mother and father, sometimes in the same mating encounter. It's an efficient system. Every adult can produce eggs, doubling the reproductive potential of the population. But being hermaphroditic doesn't mean snails fertilize themselves. They still need partners. Self-fertilization happens occasionally in some species when no mate is available, but it's not ideal. Mating with another snail mixes genes, creating healthier offspring with better chances of survival. The courtship process is surprisingly elaborate. When two snails meet and decide to mate, they begin a slow dance that can last several hours. They circle each other, touching tentacles, tasting each other's chemical signatures. They press their bodies together, foot to foot, testing compatibility. Some species do something even stranger. They shoot darts at each other. These aren't metaphorical darts. They're actual calcium structures shaped like tiny arrows, stored in a sac inside the snail's body. During courtship, the snail contracts muscles around this sac, launching the dart into its partner's flesh. It's called a love dart, though there's nothing romantic about being stabbed. The dart carries hormones that alter the partner's reproductive system, increasing the chances that the shooter's sperm will successfully fertilize eggs. It's biological manipulation, one snail chemically changing another to improve its own reproductive success. Not all snails do this. Only certain families have evolved the ability. But for those that have, it's a standard part of mating. After hours of courtship and potential dart shooting, the snails exchange sperm. They align their genital openings and transfer sperm packets to each other. Both snails receive and both give, though they might not use the sperm immediately. They can store it for months, using it when conditions are right for laying eggs. When a snail is ready to lay, it burrows into soft soil and creates a small chamber. There, it deposits a cluster of eggs, usually at 50 to 100, though numbers vary by species. The eggs are round and translucent, often with a pearlescent sheen. Each one contains a complete baby snail, already equipped with a tiny shell. The parent covers the eggs with soil and leaves. There's no parental care beyond this. The eggs either hatch or they don't, depending on moisture, temperature, and luck. In 2 to 4 weeks, if conditions are right, the baby snails emerge. They look like miniature adults, perfect replicas, just a few millimeters long. They immediately begin eating, rasping at soil and decaying plant matter with their tiny radulas. They grow steadily, their shells expanding in those mathematical spirals, and within a few months, they're mature enough to mate. The whole cycle is slow, but effective. Snails don't produce thousands of offspring like insects do. They don't need to. Their strategy is quality over quantity. Each baby snail already well-formed and equipped to survive. Many will die, of course. Birds eat them, beetles prey on them. Dry weather kills them, but enough survive to maintain populations, and those that do make it to adulthood can live for years, reproducing multiple times. It's a system refined over hundreds of millions of years, complex and strange and perfectly adapted to a life lived slowly. Two hermaphrodites meeting in the night, dancing for hours, exchanging the genetic material that will become the next generation of patient wanderers carrying spiraled homes. Those baby snails, just millimeters long, already possess remarkable engineering abilities that will serve them their entire lives. The most obvious is retraction. A snail can pull its entire body inside its shell, something that seems physically impossible when you watch it happen. The body looks too large for the space, but snails are mostly water, and water is compressible under the right conditions. They squeeze themselves inward, compacting their tissues, folding their foot and organs into the spiral chamber. It happens in seconds when danger threatens. A shadow overhead, a vibration through the ground, a sudden touch. The snail contracts muscles throughout its body, pulling everything inside. The mantle edge, that tissue we talked about earlier that builds the shell, acts as a seal once the body is fully retracted. Not a perfect seal, but enough to protect the soft parts from beaks and claws and crushing weight. The physics of this are impressive. The shell provides the rigid structure, but the snail's body provides the mechanism. Muscles anchor to the inside of the shell at specific points, particularly deep in the spiral. When these muscles contract, they pull the entire body inward, like someone hauling on a rope. The foot, being muscular and flexible, folds in on itself, fitting into spaces that seem too small. Then there's the adhesive strength we mentioned before. A snail's slime can create a bond stronger than many commercial glues. Scientists have measured the adhesive force and found it can hold many times the snail's weight. This is what lets them hang upside down from leaves or cling to walls during rainstorms that would wash away less secure creatures. The slime works through a combination of physical and chemical adhesion. The mucus fills microscopic irregularities in surfaces, creating mechanical bonds. Meanwhile, the proteins in the slime form weak chemical bonds with the surface material. Together, these create a grip that's both strong and reversible. The snail can release whenever it wants, simply by secreting more of the liquid layer that lets it glide. If a snail's shell gets damaged, it can repair it. The mantle secretes extra calcium carbonate to patch cracks and holes. The repair isn't invisible. You can usually see where damage occurred, but it's structurally sound. The shell regains its integrity, protecting the snail once again. This healing process takes weeks, but it works. As long as the damage isn't catastrophic, the snail can rebuild what it's lost. They can also right themselves if flipped over. This is harder than it sounds. The shell is top-heavy, and the foot is a flat muscle with no leverage. But snails manage it through patience and persistence. They extend the foot as far as possible to one side, creating an anchor point. Then they contract muscles asymmetrically, pulling that side of the shell downward. Slowly, using their own body weight and the friction of their slime, they rock the shell until gravity helps them flip back over. And there's their climbing ability. A snail can ascend a vertical surface carrying a shell that weighs as much as its entire body. That's like a human climbing a ladder, while carrying another human. The muscular contractions that move the foot generate remarkable force, and the slime ensures that each portion of the foot stays anchored while other portions lift and advance. These aren't conscious engineering solutions. They're evolved capabilities, refined across millions of years. But they work with mechanical precision, solving problems of adhesion, protection, repair, and locomotion through elegant biological systems that accomplish what human engineers struggle to replicate. Those shells that get repaired, that protect and house the snail, come in an astonishing variety of forms across the thousands of snail species on Earth. Some shells are tall and pointed like church spires. Others are flat spirals, barely raised above the ground. Some coil tightly, with many whorls packed close together. Others have loose, open spirals, with space between each turn. The diversity reflects millions of years of adaptation to different environments and lifestyles. Color varies wildly too. Garden snails in temperate regions tend toward browns and tans, colors that blend with soil and dead leaves. But tropical species display vivid patterns: bright yellows, deep purples, rich reds. Stripes and spots and bands of contrasting colors arranged in geometric precision along the spiral. These colors come from pigments in the snail's diet, processed through its body and incorporated into the shell as it grows. A snail eating certain minerals might produce brown tones. Another consuming different plants might create yellow or orange. The pigments are deposited by the mantle as it secretes new shell material, creating bands that record what the snail was eating at different points in its life. Some patterns serve camouflage. Broken stripes that disrupt the shell's outline, making it harder for predators to recognize. Mottled colors that match bark or stone. These snails are masters of hiding in plain sight, their shells rendering them nearly invisible against the right background. Other patterns might serve as warnings. In tropical regions, some brightly colored snails are toxic or taste terrible to predators. The vivid colors advertise this, teaching birds and other predators to avoid them. It's a strategy that works only if enough predators can learn from experience. But in stable ecosystems, it's effective. Shell thickness varies by environment. Snails in dry climates tend to have thicker shells that provide better insulation and moisture retention. Those in humid forests can afford thinner shells because water loss isn't as critical. Desert snails sometimes have pale, almost white shells that reflect sunlight, keeping the interior cooler. The shape of the opening, called the aperture, differs too. Some snails have round openings. Others have oval or irregular shapes. Some species have developed modifications called teeth, small projections on the lip of the aperture that can partially close the opening, adding extra protection when the snail retreats inside. There are even shells with unusual specializations. Some tropical land snails have shells with breathing tubes built into the structure, allowing air to reach the lung cavity even when the snail is retracted. Others have modified shells with flanges or spines that make them difficult for predators to grasp or swallow. But all of them, regardless of shape or color or size, share that spiral architecture. The logarithmic curve that appears in hurricanes and galaxies. It's one of nature's perfect forms, efficient in its use of material, strong in its structure, elegant in its simplicity. When you hold an empty snail shell, you're holding a record. The early whorls at the center show what the snail was like as a baby. The middle sections record its growth through adolescence. The outer edge shows its final size. Any irregularities in the spiral indicate stress, disease, or injury at that point in its life. Any changes in color pattern reveal changes in diet or environment. Each shell is unique, even within the same species. Two snails growing up in slightly different conditions, eating slightly different foods, will produce shells with subtle variations. Their fingerprints in calcium carbonate, individual signatures shaped by both genetics and experience, spiraling outward from a beginning to an end. That record in the shell spans a life lived at a pace almost unimaginable to us. Snails experience time differently, moving through the world in slow motion compared to most creatures. A garden snail's top speed is about 50 yards per hour. That's 0.03 miles per hour. You could walk a mile in 15 minutes. A snail would need 33 hours of continuous movement to cover the same distance. And snails never move continuously. They rest frequently, retract at the slightest disturbance, wait for better conditions. This slowness isn't a limitation, it's their nature. Their metabolism runs at a low simmer, burning energy gradually, never spiking into the frantic activity that characterizes faster animals. They don't need to be quick. They're not chasing prey or fleeing predators through speed. Their defense is the shell. Their strategy is patience. Their success comes from outlasting rather than outrunning threats. Time expands when you move this slowly. What seems like a moment to us might be a significant journey for a snail. Crossing a garden path, a distance you step over in a second, takes the snail minutes of focused effort. Climbing a plant stem to reach fresh leaves might consume an entire evening. Their lifespan reflects this pace. Many garden snails live 2 to 3 years. Some species survive 5 to 7 years. A few, particularly larger species in stable environments, can reach 10 or even 15 years. There are records of captive snails living 25 years, though this is unusual. But here's what makes it interesting. Most animals that live longer are larger or have higher metabolic rates that burn hot and bright. Snails live long by burning cool and steady. They spend much of their life in states of rest or dormancy, conserving resources, waiting. If you added up all the time a snail spends active versus inactive, the active periods might only account for a fraction of its total lifespan. During those active periods, everything happens in measured time. Mating takes hours. Feeding on a single leaf takes an hour or more. Traveling to a food source and back can consume an entire night. There's no rushing. The snail's nervous system doesn't process information quickly enough to move faster, even if its body could manage it. Its world is perceived in slow frames, each moment lingering. This creates a different relationship with the environment. Where we might experience a garden as a space we walk through in seconds, a snail experiences it as a vast landscape requiring multiple journeys to fully explore. A flower bed is not a small plot. It's territory containing numerous feeding sites, resting places, potential mates, and dangers, all of which must be navigated carefully. Seasons pass differently too. Winter dormancy can last 4 to 5 months. The snail seals itself away in autumn and emerges in spring, having experienced winter as a single, unbroken suspension. Time collapses into that sealed darkness, then expands again when conditions improve. Even death comes slowly. An injured or sick snail might take days to die, its slow metabolism prolonging the process. There's no sudden shutdown. Systems fail gradually, the heartbeat slowing further, the breathing becoming shallower, until eventually everything stops. This pace is neither good nor bad. It simply is. The snail has no concept of hurry, no anxiety about time passing. It moves when conditions allow, rests when they don't, and across the days and seasons of its life, accomplishes everything it needs to. Food gets eaten, mates get found, eggs get laid, the shell grows its spiral. And all of it happens in time, measured not by clocks, but by the slow rhythm of moisture and hunger, the turning of the world. Those months sealed away during winter are called hibernation, but snails have another form of dormancy that's equally remarkable. It's called estivation, and it happens during hot, dry summers. The trigger is environmental stress. When temperatures climb and moisture disappears, the snail faces a choice: keep moving and risk dehydration, or seal up and wait. Almost always, it chooses to wait. The process is similar to winter hibernation. The snail retreats deep into its shell and secretes that epiphragm, that mucus door we discussed earlier. But summer dormancy is more precarious than winter dormancy. In winter, the snail is protected from freezing by being underground or under leaf litter. In summer, sealed shells can be exposed to direct sunlight, and temperatures inside can climb dangerously high. Some species deal with this by burying themselves before estivating. They dig into soil, sometimes several inches down, where temperature stays more stable. Others climb up plants and seal themselves to the underside of leaves or to fence posts, seeking shade and whatever airflow might cool them. Once sealed, the transformation begins. The snail's heartbeat drops to a few beats per minute. Breathing slows to almost nothing. Digestion stops completely. The snail lives off stored energy, fat reserves built up during better times. It's not sleep. Sleep implies the possibility of waking easily. This is deeper, closer to suspended animation. Brain activity continues, but at reduced levels. The snail still processes basic sensory information. It can detect when conditions outside change, when rain falls or temperatures drop, but it doesn't respond immediately. The shift from dormancy to activity takes time. The body needs to warm up, rehydrate, restore normal function. Hibernation works similarly, but responds to different triggers. As autumn arrives and temperatures fall, snails begin preparing. They eat more if food is available, building reserves. They seek out protected locations, places that won't freeze solid or flood with winter rains. Many snails hibernate together, clustering in groups under the same log or in the same crevice. This provides some thermal mass, helping to buffer temperature extremes. It also ensures that when spring comes and they emerge, mates are nearby. The sealing process for winter is sometimes more elaborate. Some snails create multiple epiphragms, layers of mucus doors separated by air spaces. This creates insulation, dead air that helps regulate temperature and moisture. It's architecture built from spit, but it's effective. During hibernation, snails can survive being frozen, though not all species manage this. Their body fluids contain compounds that act as antifreeze, preventing ice crystals from forming inside cells and tearing them apart. The shell, being porous, allows some water to escape as ice forms outside the body, concentrating the antifreeze compounds in the remaining fluids. The remarkable thing is how long this can last. A few weeks is common. Several months is typical for winter hibernation. But some snails can remain dormant for years if conditions never improve. There are documented cases of museum specimens, snails glued to display boards and assumed dead, that woke up after 3 or 4 years when someone accidentally got them wet. The metabolic shutdown is that complete. Time stops for the snail, or near enough. No food consumed, no energy expended beyond the absolute minimum to maintain basic cellular function. Just waiting, sealed in calcium and dried mucus, trusting that eventually the world will become livable again. And almost always it does. Rain comes, temperature moderates. The snail dissolves its door and emerges, hungry but alive, ready to resume the slow business of living. When snails emerge and resume their slow business of living, they become part of something larger. They're not isolated creatures. They're members of an ecosystem, playing roles that ripple through the environment in ways most people never notice. Their primary job is decomposition. Yes, snails eat fresh plants, which is why gardeners often dislike them. But they also consume dead leaves, rotting wood, fungi, and organic debris that would otherwise accumulate. They're cleanup crew, breaking down material that's finished its first life and preparing it for recycling. That radula we discussed, filing everything into tiny particles, makes snails excellent decomposers. They can process tough plant material that bacteria and fungi alone would take much longer to break down. The particles that pass through a snail's digestive system emerge as nutrient-rich waste that enriches soil. It's not glamorous work, but ecosystems depend on it. While burrowing and crawling, snails also aerate soil. Their bodies push through earth, creating tiny channels that allow air and water to penetrate. This improves soil structure, helping roots grow and beneficial microorganisms thrive. A garden with healthy snail populations often has better soil than one without them, even if the gardener doesn't realize why. They're also food. Many creatures depend on snails as a primary food source. Thrushes and other birds have learned to crack snail shells against rocks, accessing the soft body inside. Ground beetles hunt snails, their powerful jaws able to bite through shells. Fireflies in their larval stage are specialized snail predators, injecting venom that liquefies the snail's body so they can drink it. This predation isn't cruel, it's functional. Energy flows through ecosystems, and snails are a crucial link in that flow. They convert plant matter into snail flesh, and then predators convert snail flesh into bird and beetle and firefly. Without snails, these predators would struggle. Some might disappear entirely. Even snail shells, after the snail dies, serve purposes. They provide calcium for other animals. Rodents gnaw on empty shells to get minerals for bone growth. Birds seeking calcium for egg production do the same. The shells slowly break down, returning their calcium to the soil where plants can absorb it, which snails then eat to build new shells. It's a cycle, elegant and efficient. In healthy ecosystems, snail populations stay balanced. Predators keep numbers from exploding. Limited food prevents overpopulation. Dry weather and harsh winters cull the weak. The snails that survive are the strongest, best adapted to their environment, and they pass those traits to the next generation. Problems arise when this balance breaks. In gardens where people eliminate predators, use chemicals, and provide abundant water and food, snail populations can explode. Without natural checks, they become pests, consuming plants faster than gardeners want. But this isn't the snail's fault. They're just responding to conditions humans created. In wild spaces, this rarely happens. Forests, meadows, and wetlands maintain equilibrium. Snails exist at sustainable densities, doing their work of decomposition and soil improvement without overwhelming their food sources. They're part of a web of relationships that's been functioning for millions of years. They're not the most important species in any ecosystem, But they're not insignificant either. Remove snails and you'd notice changes. Slower decomposition, different soil structure, shifts in predator populations, less calcium cycling. The system would adapt, certainly. Nature always does. But it would be different, slightly diminished, missing these patient engineers working slowly beneath our notice, turning death back into life, one microscopic bite at a time. The world snails navigate. The ecosystem they inhabit looks nothing like the world we see. Their senses build a completely different picture of reality. We've talked about their eyes, how they see only light and shadow. But vision is their weakest sense. The real information comes through chemistry and touch. A snail's world is built from smells and textures and vibrations, layered into a three-dimensional map that updates constantly as they move. Their sense of smell is thousands of times more sensitive than ours. Those lower tentacles can detect individual molecules floating in the air or dissolved on surfaces. When a snail searches for food, it's following invisible chemical gradients, moving from areas of weak scent toward areas of strong scent. The concentration increases as it gets closer, providing clear directional information. Different chemicals mean different things. Rotting vegetation smells like food. The pheromones in another snail's trail indicate a member of the same species passed this way. Predator scents trigger avoidance. The snail sorts through this chemical soup constantly, making decisions based on what it detects. Taste and smell blur together for snails. The same organs detect both airborne and contact chemicals. When a snail touches something with its tentacles, it's simultaneously smelling and tasting it, gathering maximum information from minimal contact. This dual sensing helps them identify food quickly. One touch tells them if something is edible, poisonous, or already claimed by another creature. But there's another sense that's equally important: vibration detection. The snail's entire foot is sensitive to mechanical disturbances. When something moves nearby, it creates pressure waves through the ground. The snail feels these through its foot, interpreting the pattern. Heavy footsteps from a large animal, the lighter touch of an insect, the specific vibration signature of a predatory beetle hunting nearby. This sense lets them respond to threats before they arrive. A bird landing several feet away creates vibrations the snail detects. It has seconds to retract into its shell before the bird spots it. The early warning system isn't perfect, but it improves survival odds. They also sense humidity through their skin. The entire body surface monitors moisture levels in the surrounding air. When humidity drops, they feel it as a pulling sensation, water being drawn from their tissues. When humidity rises, they feel relief, the air becoming less hostile. This constant monitoring drives their decisions about when to move and when to hide. Temperature sensing works similarly. They can't regulate their body temperature internally, so they must track external temperature closely. Too hot means seeking shade. Too cold means slowing down or sealing up. The information comes through the skin and shell, processed by a simple nervous system that translates sensation into action. Pain exists for snails, though probably not the way we experience it. They respond to injury, withdrawing from harmful stimuli, releasing stress chemicals that alter behavior. Whether this constitutes suffering in any meaningful sense is unknown. Their nervous system is simple, lacking the complex structures associated with consciousness in vertebrates. But they clearly perceive damage and respond to avoid it. All these senses combine into a model of the world that's functional for a snail's needs. No visual details, no sounds in the way we understand them, but a rich tapestry of chemical signatures, pressure patterns, moisture gradients, and temperature zones. It's enough to find food, avoid danger, locate mates, and navigate home. To us, it might seem like living in darkness, perceiving only hints and suggestions. But to the snail, it's complete. It's everything the world needs to be. With those senses guiding them, snails accomplish physical feats that seem impossible for creatures so soft and slow. A snail can pull 10 times its body weight straight up a vertical wall. Think about that. If you weigh 150 pounds, that's like climbing a ladder while carrying 1,500 pounds on your back. The snail does it routinely, hauling its shell up glass, up tree bark, up smooth metal surfaces, never losing grip. The secret is in the foot. What looks like a simple pad of muscle is actually an incredibly complex structure containing thousands of tiny muscle fibers arranged in overlapping layers. These fibers can contract independently, creating waves of motion that ripple from back to front, pushing the snail forward. Watch a snail's foot closely and you'll see these waves. They flow continuously, each contraction pushing a small section of the foot forward, while other sections stay anchored. It's like walking with 1,000 tiny legs that never lift off the ground. The motion is smooth because there's no step, no moment when the snail loses contact with the surface. The slime amplifies this effectiveness. With part of the foot anchored by the sticky bottom layer of mucus, other parts can slide forward on the slippery top layer. The snail is constantly sticking and arcing different portions of its foot, creating directed motion from what looks like simple flowing. This system generates surprising force. Those anchored portions of foot, stuck firmly to the surface, provide leverage. The muscular contractions pulling against these anchor points create movement that can overcome significant resistance. A snail can push through obstacles, force its way through narrow gaps, and maintain progress even when climbing against gravity and carrying substantial weight. The hydraulic aspect is equally impressive. Snails have what's called a hydrostatic skeleton. Their body cavity is filled with fluid under pressure. By contracting muscles in one area, they force fluid into another area, making it expand. This is how they extend their tentacles so quickly, or push their foot forward when emerging from the shell. The system works both ways. When a snail retracts into its shell, it's not just pulling with muscles. It's also compressing its body, forcing fluid to redistribute into spaces that compress further. The whole animal becomes denser, fitting into the shell's spiral chamber through a combination of muscle action and hydraulic compression. This flexibility lets snails squeeze through impossibly small openings. If the snail's head can fit through a gap, the rest can follow. The shell provides the only rigid limitation. Everything else is malleable, able to stretch and compress as needed. They flow through cracks like liquid, reforming on the other side. They're also surprisingly durable. Drop a snail from a reasonable height onto soil or grass, and it usually survives undamaged. The shell's curve distributes impact forces. The soft body inside absorbs shock. The slime provides cushioning. It's a system designed to handle the occasional fall from a plant or rock. And they're persistent. A snail trying to reach food, or a mate will attempt the same path repeatedly, testing different angles, applying sustained pressure. They don't give up easily. That slow metabolism means energy expenditure is low, so they can afford to keep trying. What seems like patience to us is simply their normal operating mode, working problems through repetition rather than clever innovation. Strength, flexibility, persistence. These are the tools that let snails navigate a world not designed for them, ascending surfaces that should be too smooth, carrying burdens that should be too heavy, surviving in conditions that should be too harsh. That durable shell protecting the snail through falls and impacts also serves as a recorder, documenting the snail's entire life in calcium carbonate. Each growth ring in the shell corresponds to a period of time. During good conditions, when food is abundant and the snail is healthy, the shell grows steadily, creating wide, even bands of new material. During stress, growth slows or stops, creating narrow bands or visible lines where growth resumed after a pause. These variations create patterns you can read if you know what to look for. A thick, smooth section indicates a period of prosperity. Thin, irregular growth suggests drought, food scarcity, or illness. Deep grooves mark serious interruptions, times when the snail sealed itself away for weeks or months. Scientists use this information to study past environments. By examining shells from specific locations and time periods, they can reconstruct what conditions were like. A series of growth lines in shells from one summer indicates that summer was unusually harsh. Consistently thick growth across multiple years suggests those years had stable, favorable weather. It works like tree rings, but on a much smaller scale. Trees record decades or centuries. Shells record years or months. But both are faithful chroniclers, writing environmental history in the structure of their growth. Color patterns add another layer of information. We mentioned that shell colors come from dietary pigments, but the timing of these pigments creates bands and stripes that reveal seasonal patterns. A snail that feeds on different plants in spring versus summer might show alternating color zones corresponding to these dietary shifts. Changes in shell texture also mean something. Rough, pitted surfaces indicate periods of poor nutrition when the snail couldn't produce smooth, high-quality shell material. Smoother sections show times of better health. Even the thickness of the shell varies based on calcium availability in the environment. Damage and repairs are part of the record too. That crack with new growth filling it shows when and how the snail was injured. The quality of the repair indicates how well the snail recovered. Multiple repairs suggest a dangerous environment with frequent threats. A pristine shell indicates a safer life. The shell's chemistry stores information at an even deeper level. Isotopes of oxygen and carbon incorporated into the calcium carbonate reflect temperature and humidity when that section of shell formed. scientists can extract tiny samples and analyze these isotopes, reconstructing detailed climate data from individual snails. This has practical applications. Researchers studying climate change use shell collections to understand how environments shifted over the past century. Museum specimens, preserved shells from decades ago, provide baseline data for comparison with modern shells. The differences reveal how temperatures, rainfall, and seasonal patterns have changed. Each shell is therefore both home and history book. It protects the snail while simultaneously recording every significant event the snail experienced. Food abundance and scarcity, seasonal changes, injuries and recoveries. All of it written in layers of mineral and protein, preserved as long as the shell remains intact. After the snail dies, the shell persists. It might last years, slowly weathering, breaking down, returning its calcium to the soil. But until then, it remains readable. Anyone with knowledge can pick up an empty shell and see the story of that particular snail's journey through life. Growth rings spreading outward from the center, color bands marking seasons, repair sites showing resilience, texture variations indicating health. The whole life, spiraling outward, preserved in architecture that started as a grain-sized beginning and grew into a complete, individual record of existence. Each shell tells an individual story, and increasingly, research suggests that snails might recognize these individuals, treating some differently than others. This idea challenges our assumptions about what creatures this simple can do. Snails have about 20,000 neurons in their nervous system. Humans have 86 billion. With such limited processing power, recognizing individuals seems unlikely. But evidence suggests it happens anyway. Studies have shown that some snails prefer certain companions over others. When given a choice of which snail to rest near, they don't choose randomly. They select specific individuals more often than chance would predict. This suggests they're detecting something unique about those individuals and remembering it. The mechanism is probably chemical. Each snail's mucus has a slightly different composition based on diet, genetics, and gut bacteria. These differences create unique chemical signatures. When snails touch tentacles or encounter each other's trails, they might be reading these signatures and storing information about which signature belongs to which individual. Whether this constitutes true recognition or just preference for certain chemical profiles is debatable. The snail might not have a concept of that snail versus this snail. It might simply register familiar beneficial chemistry versus unfamiliar chemistry. But the practical result is the same. They associate with specific individuals preferentially. Clustering behavior supports this. When snails rest together, the groups aren't random assemblies. The same individuals tend to cluster repeatedly. They're choosing to be near each other, suggesting some form of social preference or bond, however simple. These associations might have practical benefits. Snails resting together retain moisture more effectively. They also create a larger mass that's more visible to some predators, but harder for those predators to attack efficiently. There's safety and comfort in numbers, even for creatures as simple as snails. Some research indicates that snails learn from each other. When one snail discovers a good food source, others in the area often find it soon after, more quickly than random searching would predict. They might be following trails, but there's evidence suggesting they respond more strongly to trails from familiar individuals versus strangers. This creates something like a social network, at least in a basic sense. Information about food, danger, and shelter spreads through the population via chemical trails and direct encounters. Snails that maintain associations benefit from the collective knowledge of the group. There's even evidence of something like cooperation in mating. Hermaphroditic snails could theoretically mate with any other adult, but they often show preferences, and those preferences aren't random. Snails seem to prefer mates they've encountered before, suggesting they remember previous successful matings and seek to repeat them. Whether any of this involves consciousness is unknown and probably unknowable. Consciousness requires self-awareness, some sense of I as separate from not I. There's no evidence snails have this. Their behaviors might be entirely automatic responses to chemical stimuli, complex reflexes rather than choices. But the distinction might matter less than we think. Whether the snail consciously decides, I prefer this individual, or simply experiences a positive chemical response that draws it toward certain companions, the outcome is the same. Social structure, primitive but real, emerges from these repeated associations. They're not solitary wanderers, each snail isolated in its shell. They're community members, recognizing familiar individuals, forming loose associations, sharing information through chemistry and proximity. It's not complex, but it's social, connecting individuals into something larger than themselves. A network of slow-moving creatures navigating the world through gentle cooperation. Those cooperative communities exist in gardens and forests where conditions are relatively stable. But snails have adapted to environments far more extreme, places where survival requires remarkable specialization. Desert snails face perhaps the harshest conditions. In the Sonoran Desert, some species experience ground temperatures exceeding 140 degrees Fahrenheit. Most animals can't survive this, but desert snails have evolved strategies that make the impossible routine. They estivate for most of the year, sometimes 11 months straight. They emerge only during rare rainfall events, quickly feeding and mating before sealing up again. Their shells are pale, almost white, reflecting sunlight and reducing heat absorption. The shell structure is thicker than forest snails, providing better insulation. Some desert species can survive years without food or water, their metabolism reduced to nearly nothing. When rain finally comes, they emerge within hours, their bodies rehydrating rapidly, their systems returning to full function almost instantly. Then they have days, maybe weeks, if conditions stay favorable, to accomplish everything they need before the desert dries out again. Mountain snails face different challenges. Above treeline, where temperatures swing wildly and oxygen is thinner, specialized species have adapted to survive. Their shells are often darker, absorbing heat during brief sunny periods. They remain active at temperatures that would force lowland snails into dormancy. Some alpine snails have antifreeze compounds in their tissues that let them survive being frozen solid, not dormant in frozen conditions. but actually frozen, ice crystals forming outside their cells. When temperatures rise, they thaw and resume activity with no apparent damage. Cave snails represent another extreme. In eternal darkness, they've lost their eyes entirely over evolutionary time. Some species are completely transparent, their shells thin and colorless. They navigate entirely through chemical senses, feeding on bacteria and fungi in the cave's nutrient-poor environment. These cave dwellers grow incredibly slowly and live extraordinarily long lives. Without the seasonal cycles that drive most snails' rhythms, they simply persist, growing by millimeters per year, potentially living decades. Time means nothing in the changeless dark. Freshwater and marine snails evolved from land ancestors that returned to aquatic environments. They've developed gills instead of lungs, though the anatomy still shows evidence of their terrestrial origins. Some freshwater snails can survive drought by burrowing into mud and waiting, just like their land cousins. There are even predatory snails with remarkable hunting adaptations. Cone snails in tropical waters have harpoon-like teeth that inject venom powerful enough to kill fish instantly. Some cone snail venoms are dangerous to humans. These slow-moving hunters shouldn't be able to catch fast-swimming prey, but their chemical weapons make speed irrelevant. Forest snails in tropical regions grow larger than temperate species. Some reach the size of a human fist, their shells intricate spirals in vivid colors. With stable temperatures and constant moisture, they can afford to grow continuously, building mass that would be impossible in variable climates. Each of these specialized forms demonstrates the same fundamental snail design adapted for specific challenges. The basic architecture remains: the spiral shell and muscular foot and rasping tongue. But the details shift, fine-tuned across millions of years to match particular environments. From desert heat to alpine, cold, from cave darkness to ocean depths, snails have found ways to persist. They're generalists that became specialists, taking that ancient design and modifying it just enough to survive in places no generalist could manage. Patience and adaptation, working together across deep time, producing diversity from a single successful blueprint. From deserts to mountains to caves, snails adapted and survived. But perhaps the most profound thing about them isn't where they live, but how they live. There's something deeply calming about a creature that moves at thorough 0.03 miles per hour and considers this adequate. No anxiety about being slow, no comparison to faster creatures. The snail simply moves at the pace its body allows and accomplishes everything it needs to. Think about what that means. A snail will spend an entire evening traveling 25 feet to reach food. It doesn't rush. It can't rush, so it doesn't try. It moves steadily, leaving its silver trail, feeling the world through chemistry and touch, and eventually arrives. Always arrives, because arriving isn't about speed. It's about persistence. The shell, that spiral they carry everywhere, is both protection and history. Everything they've experienced, written in calcium rings. They can't leave it behind, can't start fresh somewhere without their past. The weight of their history comes with them on every journey, and somehow this weight doesn't stop them. They climb walls while carrying everything they've ever been. There's a lesson there, perhaps. We carry our history too, though ours is written in memory instead of shell. And like snails, we move forward despite the weight, because moving forward is what living things do. Snails don't plan their routes carefully or optimize their paths. They follow chemical gradients, moisture, temperature. They respond to what's immediately in front of them. When they encounter obstacles, they simply try another direction. No frustration, no sense of time wasted, just patient redirection until they find a way through. And when conditions become impossible, they stop. They seal themselves away and wait. Days, months, years if necessary. They don't fight conditions they can't change. They accept them, conserve their energy, and trust that eventually things will improve. And they do. The snail emerges, resumes its journey, continues its slow progress through the world. This patience isn't passive, it's active waiting, the body maintaining itself at minimal cost until opportunity returns. It's survival through endurance rather than struggle, not giving up, but not exhausting itself either, just existing in suspension until existence can resume fully. The spiral itself holds meaning beyond mathematics. It's a shape that returns to itself while always expanding outward. Each curve echoes the ones before it, but grows larger. The snail's life follows this pattern too. Each day similar to the last, but slightly different. Each season a return, but at a different scale. Growth that circles back while moving forward. We began tonight with these ancient wanderers, carrying their homes through the world at their own perfect pace. We've explored how they survive, how they sense, how they move through time differently than we do. And perhaps what we find in their slowness is permission. Permission to move at our own pace, to carry our history without shame, to wait when waiting is wise, to trust in patience and persistence over speed and force. The snail doesn't hurry towards sleep. It simply rests when the world tells it to rest. And maybe that's what we can learn tonight. If this gentle journey through snail science brought you some peace, please subscribe to Simple Science for Sleep so you can join us again tomorrow for another quiet exploration. Leave a comment telling us what you'd like to learn about next, or just let us know where you are in the world and how this late evening finds you. Your presence here, in this small community of curious minds seeking rest, means everything. May your sleep be deep and your dreams be peaceful. Good night.